Hey, yeah, probably good to get started. This is Michael.
Oh, cool. Great. Um, well, yeah, I'm stoked to be here. This course is super awesome. I was really excited when I heard you guys were all putting it on. And yeah, my name's Trevor. I'm from Rabbithole. I do research, analytics, strategy. Pretty much everything under the sun, as it is a pretty small startup. So I know you guys are going to be looking at rabbit hole data at some point here throughout the course, and just wanted to give you a brief overview on what rabbit hole is, first off, so you know what you're analyzing, and then maybe go over some data points, answer any questions you guys have. I think there's a lot of nuances with rabbit hole data, which we'll be able to get into. But yeah, first let me just give you a brief introduction on rabbit hole, talk about sort of the problem that we see, how we're solving that, and then get into the Pathfinder program that we have as well, which is our form of attempting to decentralize eventually into a DAO. So yeah, I've got this really pretty slide deck here. So hopefully you guys are able to see my screen and follow along. But basically, what Rabbit Hole is it's a number of things. We have value propositions for both protocols and users, as well as something we're building towards. So for protocols, it is the best place to find and engage the right users. So really, protocols come to us, and we partner with them actually to drive users to their platform. For users, they can earn tokens through quests, credentials through skills, and this is all done through verifiable on-chain actions. So Rabbit Hole is really striving to become a place that people can go to actually verify what they've done with their wallets, rather than just having a resume. You actually would have some form of an on-chain resume, a profile, and various actions that you can take on our platform and otherwise to kind of incentivize that. So in the future, Rabbit Hole really wants to be the place to find and discover work in Web3. And now, of course, that's a huge goal. I'll get into why we think that's something that we want to solve. But first, the problem that we're seeing, and of course, I've got some awesome Dune Analytics data right here, is that users are rewarded for speculation over participation. And it's something that we've really seen throughout many different markets, but especially in crypto. There's a ton of attention going on. And for an example, I pulled this chart that shows mainnet user addresses, um, and the amount that have actually interacted with various DeFi apps. And so you can see it's only a very small sliver. I think it's about 3%. And really what people are doing is they're, sending funds, buying NFTs, making, really small transactions on chain. Um, but not a lot are actually using these protocols. And so, yeah, each week dozens of protocols come into the space. People are overwhelmed, and really like what they're looking for is a way to separate signal from noise, um, and try to get people away from that speculative user base where they're not just like buying a token on Coinbase. They're actually going to Aave, for example, and like trying out lending funds, seeing what it's like to kind of be your own bank. So the current system here is broken, and to break this down a little bit, memes are focused on speculation. As I said, speculation moves markets, less so fundamental analysis. If fundamental analysis moved markets, I think all of us would probably be retired by now. Onboarding is scary. Uh, this is especially true when you're dealing with financial applications because there's a pretty big barrier to understanding what a wallet is, what gas is, why is it so expensive? What do you do if you send funds to the wrong address or a dead address? Like when you're dealing with money, people get pretty nervous. It's hard to get them engaged. And user acquisition is just generally inefficient. It's tough for protocols to get users through means that are positive sum. Liquidity mining is a really good example where, in the short term, everyone benefits, but 6 months out when those funds dry up, protocols lose users, token price goes down, and really people are just hopping from protocol to protocol. So Rabbit Hole aims to solve this in a few different ways, but primarily crypto networks come to us to find and engage the best users for their communities. and individuals will earn credentials and tokens for actually participating and contributing in these networks. So we have various ways of doing this. Users can learn and earn through quests, like I mentioned, through skills. There's verified actions, so we actually use the graph, subgraphs, to verify if you've done the action that we're looking for on chain. And then we actually have Sybil resistance measures. And for anyone that doesn't know what that is, it's basically when bots can like Sybil attack your server or your platform by creating a handful of addresses to kind of try to game a system. And so right now we've integrated with Bright ID, where you actually have to go and get Bright ID verified to complete a lot of our quests. In the future, we hope to add more anti-Sybil sort of technologies and apps there. But it is one of the bigger problems that I think a lot of people are facing in Web3. And so we have a way of actually driving unique users to platforms rather than just some guy with 1,000 different wallets. So this is an example of a quest, and you can see at the top we have quests, skills, and projects. Quests right now are sort of how we dog food our skills. But basically, if you were a user coming to Rabbithole, you would log in, and the first thing you would see is this quest pop up, which I believe is actually live right now. And so what this quest is actually joining a DAO on DAO House, which is a no-code platform for Moloch DAOs. And you would go through and complete these tasks. Go to their website, you would create proposals, you would vote, and then you would actually redeem this quest and receive both a token reward and an NFT reward for doing so. And so we would essentially partner with DAO House, and they would want to drive 1,500 users, unique users, to their site to learn about their platform. And so, yeah, by measuring on-chain actions, we're trying to set a foundation for this way to verify contributions and provide more opportunities for people to actually work in DAOs, work in Web3. So yeah, one of our biggest ways of doing this is actually by gaining skills. So everything you do on chain is trackable. We're trying to find a way to group that into usable skills. And so you can earn these on-chain credentials to showcase your mastery of these new technologies, find opportunities. And crypto networks can actually utilize these skills to target specific user segments. So what that means is they can come to us and say, I want someone with this token swapping skill to use my platform. And so the token swapping skill actually verifies that you've swapped on multiple networks with multiple platforms. So it could be Uniswap, SushiSwap, and Balancer, on Optimism and Polygon, for instance. And you would obtain that skill, and then the crypto network would be able to come to us and see the list of users that actually did that. And so yeah, we're trying to build them out right now as sort of like the basic functions of being crypto literate and having like some sense of being crypto native. But in the future, we want to build these skills out almost in like a skill tree sense for anyone that like played any video games with skill trees, where really you're like leveling up in each of these. And so a lot of what we talked about actually has a lot to do with curation. And I think everyone at Rabbithole believes that curation should not be in the hands of a few. It really should be spread out to multiple people and really community members that are truly participating, contributing. So we want to eventually decentralize, and we're taking steps towards that today with our Pathfinder program. So in order to set up quests and skills and like run our core product, there's various roles that are needed from the core team, but we're starting to outsource this kind of to a wider community and eventually become Rabbithole DAO. And so these are sort of the 5 roles that are the pillars of running our business. And so stewards, navigators, artisans, pioneers, and then this new one, explorers, together can kind of run the entire platform, outside of potentially like some dev work that needs to go into actually becoming a protocol. But basically stewards create and pass our governance proposals in other communities to get quests on board. So they're kind of like our BD sales pipeline. Navigators are actually deploying the subgraphs, so the underlying infrastructure to make sure these tasks work. Artisans actually get to design the NFTs and get paid for doing so. On each of our quests, these NFTs are given out as part of the reward. And yeah, we've trying to build a collective of creative minds to get some talent in there. Pioneers, one of my favorite roles, actually create content that guides users through these quests. So some of you may have seen we have a mirror profile where pioneers are going through and actually minting tutorial guides on how to use various platforms step by step. So we try to pair these with the quest so that users don't have to ask too many questions right off the bat and actually feel comfortable going through all the steps. And then, yeah, lastly, we have this explorer's role, which is new. It hasn't launched yet. Hoping to launch it in a month or so. But it's essentially being a data analyst for Rabbithole. So that's kind of where this course meets, and we want to find a way for the community to provide wider value for all of Rabbithole stakeholders and Web3 through on-chain analytics. So this explorer's role, I'm going to dive into just a little bit further. Basically, you're defining what it means to be an on-chain analyst by creating Dune dashboards, queries, answering specific questions, case studies, using multiple tools. Basically, everything we do at Rabbithole needs to be analyzed in some sense. And yeah, this role gets to do that. So one of the coolest parts about it is actually you're providing value to the stakeholders by generating insights on a wide variety of protocols. You don't necessarily have to work like on only DeFi, only NFTs. You actually get a lot of exposure to different teams, different KPIs, and so yeah, you learn a ton along the way. So some example contributions to this could be creating a Dune dashboard that you see on the right. Could also be a case study down below that kind of highlights some of like the main insights that we've had. But basically, it's really about how do we take the on-chain data and organize it into actionable insights. And so some of the KPIs we look at for Quest specifically, it's really all about retention of new users. What are they doing? What kind of volume are they driving? What other protocols are they using? What tokens did they deposit? Things like that. And so what's most applicable to this course, I would say, is it really has to do with the KPIs that we're driving for users specifically. So outside of just a quest, it's kind of like what Rabbithole users are doing on chain. So what other dApps do they use? What activities are they engaging in? How much volume do they drive? Are they active? What are their balances of various tokens? Do they use side chains? Is it only mainnet? Is it only Polygon? Things like that. So really trying to build out a user profile. It's an initiative that I think are really trying to double down on, and it's actually a perfect opportunity and pretty unique to like actually get a subset of users and then go and dive in and see who they are. And because they are provably unique, the users that you guys will actually be looking at are real humans. So that's pretty cool too. So couple nuances I would say is that Rabbithole is not a protocol yet. So we have a lot of manual processes that are still running our platform. We are eventually becoming decentralized, but we don't actually have smart contracts that are queryable right now. So we utilize subgraphs to verify these on-chain actions, but there's subgraphs from other teams. So if we were working with Aave and the quest was for lending and borrowing any token on the platform, we would actually find an Aave subgraph and look for a set of users that both verified that they completed the task on Rabbithole and cross-reference those to the subgraph. And so when you're doing Dune queries, you actually have to cross-reference this list of users. So we typically use like where users are in, and then a whole list of addresses as the SQL statement. And so, yeah, I mean, basically, there is a certain subset, I would say, of users that uh, can show up in Dune, whereas like if you're looking at a too wide of a variety of addresses, the data can get skewed a bit. But I don't believe there is a limit on the number of addresses you can put in one of these queries. At least I haven't reached it yet. So for now, it's still working, and hopefully, when we become a smart contract, you can just join a table, and it'd be a little more straightforward. Um, and so yeah, that is kind of the bulk of Rabbithole. Um, and some nuances to querying our data. Just wanted to open that up to questions. If you guys want to go back to a different slide, we can talk about that, or really anything else you guys wanted to ask.
So awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. But yeah, if anyone has questions, definitely, yeah, feel free to unmute yourselves and jump in.
I do also have a couple.
Yeah, maybe show like an example or something.
Yeah, I've got some dashboards pulled up and some queries too. So one of my favorite dashboards that I've put together has actually been for the graph. Mainly because their data is actually very straightforward and easy to query. So you'll notice when you start diving into various different contracts in Dune, they have varying levels of complexity to them. The graph came up nice and smooth. I didn't have too many problems with querying it, and so it has become a really good example dashboard. So walking through this a little bit, there's a set of KPIs that we always include when we're looking at Rabbithole data. The number of new people taking the action. So for this quest, it was to signal on 2 different subgraphs. So we incentivized 1,500 people to go through the steps of becoming a curator on the graph, which, as you can see, is actually a pretty unique task to do. 92% of the people that we got to their platform were entirely new to the graph. Granted, the graph had just launched at the time, at least their curation process had. But yeah, so we started to break down new curator growth, which is one of the best metrics. And I mean, 2,500% growth is pretty insane actually for these protocols. So like they were getting, on average, just a couple new users a day. We pretty much spiked their servers after that for a week or so. And some of the other things that we were looking at was like, who are the top curators? What are the subgraphs they were curating on actually? So you can see that most people preferred to do more well-known subgraphs, which when you're curating is actually, it's a pretty useful task because you are essentially staking your reputation on one of these subgraphs. So you're saying that the data behind the sushi mainnet exchange subgraph is valid. And then yeah, we looked at overall trends. So you can see back in July when we did this, there was a huge spike. And really, I think one of the things that we want to solve for is user retention. You can see very clearly here that not a lot of people have come back to curate on the graph. And so like while we can incentivize the initial push, it's really up to the graph to figure out a strategy to get that done. And so we are trying to build in ways to like incentivize users over longer periods of time, and truly focus in with various skills and filter these users for people that would actually provide value to the ecosystem. So an example on breaking down how we actually query this data, I thought this one was a good place to start. You can see we use where name curator, who the users are in, and then this long list of users, which goes on for many miles. And so yeah, by doing that, we can see like their initial block time that they came in on. as well as the number of transactions that they made. Another dashboard we have here for Compound, you can see we looked at similar statistics, new users, new suppliers, new borrowers, what tokens they were kind of involved in on chain. I'd say that when you start to look at data in general on Dune, forking is your friend. Uh, I think most of the community is open to having their queries be used pretty widely and as resources. I know that I would not have been able to get this far without using other people's queries, as starting points, or if you're stuck on something, it's really good to go and reference all of these. I mean, all the data is public, so if you want to know like how to query for specific tokens on Compound, which is actually fairly complex, there's a whole set of people that have actually written a lot of this out for you. So you can go through and find like lists like this. You don't have to do it manually, fork the query, and then apply it to a different one. Another thing we have to do often is union various contracts because a lot of these contracts will only have partial data. So like for Compound, all of like Ethereum related mints and supply is in this one contract, but if it's in ERC20, it's in this contract. So we try to grab all of that data.
Yeah, I think an interesting call out here too. I recognize from looking at this Compound dashboard, like I knew from a few projects I've done for other kind of protocols, they definitely like when you put things in their colors. So I noticed you kind of match the whole Compound color scheme here.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. That's something I learned from my corporate finance days of, using presentations as like a deliverable rather than a tool. People really like when you colorize
Yeah.
things and like the product itself.
I have a question.
Sure.
In terms of user retention, you mentioned you want to solve for this, and I'm just wondering what are the kinds of queries that you're looking at to figure out how effective your activities are at improving user retention, or like what are some of the variables that would influence that?
Yeah, that's a great question actually. There's a couple of things, and like I would say it depends on the level of retention and the protocol you're looking at. Um, but initially, the first thing we can look at is what percentage of users have come back to do any transaction on that protocol again. So if we incentivized supplying only on Aave, you could be like, okay, well, did any of those users come back and borrow? Um, and so that's like the initial one that we would look at. Another would be that specific task. Did they come back and supply again? Um, did they go and borrow again? So seeing if they come back, and typically I would say short term retention is probably just going to be pretty low across the board, no matter what you do, because a lot of what we're talking about here are like pretty significant financial actions that you would take. And, in the real world, someone's not going to go and borrow money 3 times a week every week for the next 6 months. And, unless you're like a loan shark, you probably won't be doing that very often. And so I would say expanding your time horizon is a good variable because maybe someone won't come back in the next 3 months, but if you look at the next 6 or 9 months, you might find some pretty useful data. Another thing we can look at is if the users held their positions. So if they're LPing, did they hold that liquidity position for a longer period of time? Did they just, mint something real quick to check a box? It's kind of like looking at the depth of what the user did.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, I'll go with another one now. Yeah, so it was good. You mentioned retention, all kinds of things that you all kind of look at to judge how well the quests do. I think like for everyone in the course who's maybe kind of thinking what are some data sets they might want to like use and play around with. I wonder, is there anything kind of top of mind for you that would be kind of useful for people to jump into to try to experiment with Rabbithole data?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've shared a CSV of a sample set of 5,000 users with Andrew. I imagine he
Awesome.
would share it with his group at some point. But yeah, that set of users are Bright ID verified users, and I actually filtered them based off of like when they last logged into Rabbithole. So they should be the most recent as of I think the data says maybe a month old. But they should be fairly active users. And yeah, I mean, like, I think these points right here are really some cool things to focus in on. So not necessarily directly related to a quest, but more about just who that subset of users is and what they do. An example query for that would be like this active wallet one, where I kind of broke down the last transaction they made on chain on Ethereum's mainnet, and when that was. So like, did they make a transaction today? How many users? Last transaction was 90 days ago. So you can actually see like this middle point, people are making transactions like anywhere from 1 to 3 months, which is cool.
Yeah, actually reminds me. I have my own personal question now. Have you thought about I guess like through all this, you definitely see different types of user behavior. Have you tried to think about almost kind of like a user segmentation of how maybe say one way could be like archetypes, like oh this is an active trader, let's see what they do. One way could be this is a compound user, let's see what else they do. Yeah, I wonder if you thought of anything along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's actually like a big initiative that I want to kick off over the next few months. Here is like building out user profiles specifically based off of segmented users. So part of this exercise at first is going to be like collecting as much data as we can on the users, like actually using tables like DEX trades and NFT trades from Dune. You can really start to see like, okay, what NFTs do these people own? How often are they trading them? And then starting to group those into different cohorts. I think some of those actions may actually come about outside or I would say off chain, combining that with like some Rabbithole product data too. But yeah, I mean that's probably going to be one of our most helpful things as we start to really dive into like how do we target the right users for the right protocols. So that's a good question.
Yeah. Cool. Any last questions from anyone? All right. Long last awkward pause. All right. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
appreciate
So
you guys
there.
having me
Yeah.
here, and like, please reach out anyone in this group if you guys have questions.